lights go dim, it's time to find out what's within. Behind the camera, there's so much more. With AndyGames, let's explore. Behind the camera with AndyGames, meet the streamers, learn their names. Off the screen, who are they? Tune in now, don't delay.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera with AndyGames. This is the podcast where I interview streamers and content creators with the sole purpose of getting to know the person a little bit better behind the camera. Today, I sat down with Jakub Rucinski, the author of 2022 novels Paradigm Shift and No Breaks. We sat down and discussed the writing process of this, Jakub's collabs, and everything in between. Here is the interview. Jakub, thank you so much for taking the time to come on Behind the Camera with AndyGames. How are we doing today?
Yeah, of course. I'm doing quite well. I was glad that you invited me.
Of course. Well, obviously, we do have a lot to talk about. And of course, with your history, I definitely think we are in for a very interesting conversation. So, but yeah, first of all, so I just wanted to touch on the point of you having your record for the longest novel ever written by a teenager in Paradigm Shift.
Yep.
So talk us through the creative process of Paradigm Shift, because to write a novel at the age of 17 is kind of incredible. So how did that all come about?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and I've had to explain it in a lot of different ways. So it's been 3 years since the release of Paradigm Shift. I did that in April of 2022, and that was once everything, the publishing and the deal was finalized. But before that, there was a creative process of around 3 to 4 years. I originally started writing the book or making drafts for it when I was 13, because I believed that my knowledge of and proficiency in like English and writing and literature was enough that I could write something by myself. So I originally set out a goal to write a novel, and a novel is usually classified as a work that is at least a couple dozen chapters, or it is over 100,000 words. And the first draft that I had written was 40,000 words. It was pretty much exactly the same story that would be told in the book that came out urgently after it in 2022, the final copy. The idea was to break it down into four separate parts of it, four separate settings with which the protagonist, Oliver Anderson, would go through. And when people ask me for the category of the book, it started out as somewhat of a political thriller, but it ended up in this general alternate history, I guess, historical fiction thriller, where it incorporates some elements of science fiction to analyze a world that could be but weren't. And a lot of people compare it to dystopian fiction novels. The general idea behind it was to imagine a world that, in a lot of these situations where you watch science fiction movies or historical fiction movies, you see a lot of these giant societies, and somehow they all manage to collapse, or there's some sort of resistance. And often in real life situations, you do not see the same thing happening. The connections between people are more intrinsic, they're more complicated. You could adapt them into full like drama movies. And the idea was to show this like reckoning of a character as he goes through growth, from basically like a child with the first chapter starting with that, a flashback, to a teenager, and eventually someone who has to take up the reins of actually providing for the people around him, or making a living. And I wanted the main character from the very beginning of that first draft to be someone who is good at deception. I wanted the novel to circulate about this reality, this setting, this country where it is impossible to pretty much do anything. But the character, being so skilled at deception, having a history in it, actively practicing it, would get himself up into the higher ranks of society. And all of that was done in the name of this just slight world building to show all the different parts of it. So with the four parts, I originally, when I was writing it at 13, 14, I intended it to be split up into the first chapter, and this is where the cover comes from, and the first chapter being flashback, and then the first stage of the actual novel, about a quarter into it, would be the character at sea in the Navy. Then after his deployment at the Navy, Oliver Anderson starts to work at a shipyard, and he works in very poor working conditions. I wanted that to be the second part of the novel. I wanted all of the character exposition of the people on the outside, all of the reintroductions of the people that took place in the first part to happen then, and I wanted the seeds for the actual climax of the story to brew then. Then the third part would be him infiltrating more, advantageous and expensive and unscrupulous parts of the society, the more fancy parts of the White Stock Hub where the story is set. Eventually leading up to the climax of the story, where all of the characters that were introduced throughout the first parts meet their conclusion. They face their different endings. And I wanted the story of Oliver Anderson to be as ambiguous towards the end. So to quickly summarize it, as soon as I finished that first draft, and it was around 40,000 words, and I had these ideas brewing in my mind for many years, I started making all these maps and started sketching all these characters, and I thought, working with different artists and graphic designers, I thought, okay, this is the general concept that I want to make for this. It's been in my mind for years. I finished that when I was 16 years old, just turned 16, and I was in secondary school or high school at the time. And then I realized, wait, this is horrible. This first draft didn't come out the way I would want to write it at all, and I don't want anyone reading this without knowing me to get the impression that this is written by a teenager. I want this to sound like a professional novel.
Yeah.
So I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the entire book that I had just written, I'm going to rewrite it from beginning to end, and I'm going to try to shorten it. What happened in the end is I didn't shorten it. I made it 4 times longer. But another promise I made to myself is that aside from just revising the book and writing it literally beginning to end, resketching every single word, I would hire an editor to help me with the book, particularly the beginning and the end, as I believe those were the most important. And by the time that I was done with that, I was 17 going on 18, so I was about to be an adult. And the book got published. I made a deal with Barnes & Noble, which is an American book publisher, not publisher, but a store. I did that through a variety of different publishers that I was working with. I also set up deals on my own to sell the book independently to a bunch of stores and publishing houses as well. I got an international copy to be sent to places like the UK and Germany to order them from European countries. I made translations. I made audiobooks. Of course, I had the graphic designer design the cover as well, and I got my ghostwriter, editor to help out with the skimmings of the book to sort out any incongruencies or any grammar issues. And then eventually, by the time that the book got out, it became available via Amazon and all the places. And people just started hitting me up for the news interviews in the first year. That eventually flattened through, but I noticed that the book was getting traction online when I published it as an audiobook. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start, keep expanding on this. So to answer your question, yeah, it was like a multi-year process. I had no idea what the hell I was doing for the first half of it. And then in the end, everything just sort of flattened through, and I began to understand, okay, these ideas that I had when I was very, very young, I could actually put them out as a book and finish this novel, finish this thing. That's what happened.
Yeah, that's some story. One thing that's particularly notable for me personally from that is the fact you started the process at 13 years old, and that's an incredibly intelligent and complex idea for a 13-year-old to have. But of course, what makes sense is the fact that as you grow older, you're going to kind of learn more about writing styles, your own writing style, things like that. And then you're going to read back and think, well, no, I actually don't like this because I now know this when I'm older. And when you're still at school age, you're learning something all the time, of course. So, but what was the inspiration behind Paradigm Shift?
Right. So I think originally, this sounds kind of cliche. A bit of the ideas did come out of me out of nowhere, as if in a dream. Mm-hmm. And a bit of the ideas, I think, were based off of previous works that I had read. So the first genre of literary fiction that I really became interested in were dystopian fiction. And the first books that really affected me were books by Kurt Vonnegut or Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, the types. Then I got very big into historical fiction, things that were set during the World War I, World War II periods, classic novels as well as those written by Ernest Hemingway and C.S. Lewis and the sort. And I thought to myself, how could I combine these two elements? So when I describe it on my website, my style of writing is neo-traditionalist. That is in the sense that it's traditionalist literature. It's the type of story that you would expect to see published 200 years ago, but it implements some of these postmodern elements, and that's what I wanted to do from the beginning. So I thought to myself that I wanted to combine the ideas for historical fiction with science fiction, and that's an extremely difficult thing to do. You can't do that without deviating from what is actually history. Yeah. But I discovered that I can give it a historical fiction feel while still implementing elements that would otherwise not fit within that context. So what I mean by that was I wanted to write a story where the main character, you felt as if this was someone from many, many years ago. Even in the book within Paradigm Shift, whenever they use phones, they're not like mobile phones. Everything is within this sort of security apparatus where the characters are being closely watched and are always afraid of it. So what they do is there are these phone booths, which are still here, of course, in the UK. They're quite antiquated though, and they're always filled with like cups and various other stuff because nobody
Oh
ever
yeah,
uses them.
they are.
I see them
They're a
at
mess now. Like,
yeah, I see them at train stations all the time. Whenever I go from like one part of the UK to another, I book it via like train line, and then I look at the like little compartments on the side of the actual stations, and there's always like a phone booth there. It's just never used. Um, and it's always funny, this kind of contradiction. But in the book, I wanted to implement that as much as possible because I thought it was a clever concept.
yeah.
And I wanted there to be like different operators. It would feel like the 50s or 60s when people actually used phone booths, and then you had to talk to the operator, and you had to tell them who you were calling. You had these phone books, phone depositories, and then you would actually do it manually. You would tap in the number as when with your finger. And my father still has one of those old timey phones.
Oh
I
yes.
don't think it works where you pin the number in. I wanted to implement that from like historical fiction because I thought that was a very, very good idea. But I also wanted it to be in this backdrop, this huge city. So when I initially got the idea for the book, I started designing this huge city. I started sketching out on paper. I got my graphic designer and illustrator friend to help me with that. Some of the drawings that they made and a bunch of other people made that I was familiar with actually did end up in the final like copies and the sales and marketing copies of the book, the actual advertising. So when you look at Paradigm Shift on Google Images, a lot of these drawings do come up. But the idea was to sketch it out to be this sort of multi-layered city. The biggest inspiration that I had to quickly wrap up this question was I saw this post. This is ages ago, years ago, way before I had written the book. I saw it somewhere online, and it was a skyscraper in the Portuguese former colony in China called Macau. That is now a special administrative district in China, and it's famous for gambling and things like that.
Yeah.
It's similar to Hong Kong in many respects, but much smaller. And because they're so cramped there and because they're so luxurious, it's kind of like Singapore in that sense. These skyscrapers had a weird aesthetic to them where there were several skyscrapers. There were stacked floors on different levels of them where you could normally go out and you could watch the city from above them. But at the very top level, there was a floor on which there was grass and a grass field and multiple suburban houses built on top of the
All right.
skyscrapers. So people who lived in those apartment buildings literally went up and down all day, while there was a suburban neighborhood sitting directly on top of the actual apartment blocks. So I thought, okay, what if instead of people being spread out in cities and all across, a book, a fiction book, a thriller, a spy novel, something of that sort, was set in a world that had these major socioeconomic divides, where we'd be divided by level. And the people who lived in suburban housing would not live in normal suburban neighborhoods. They would literally have to live on top of the poorer
Yeah.
people who would have to live in those apartment blocks. And then below those apartment blocks, there would be like other streets. And in those streets, there would be even smaller houses. And then you go down to lower levels in, little societies built in caves. I wanted it to have to sort of fantasy feel while still implementing these elements of historical fiction. Where even though there's this huge sprawling metropolis, people still have to use old-timey technology
Yeah.
because they're not allowed to use anything else. That was the idea for the book. It came partially from dystopian fiction, and it came partially from the idea like, hey, what if there was like a little tinge of science fiction world building, but the characters still weren't these huge, like futuristic mega robots or elves. They were just ordinary people trying to get by.
Yeah. I love that. I love that as a concept as well. It shows the amount of thought that you've put into it as well. And something particularly that I like is the use of like the phone booths, the pay phones, like because
Yes,
you know you mentioned today there you see them everywhere in the UK right now,
of course.
and they're not used. Like they're either absolutely battered or riddled with graffiti. But like to me, it kind of says that it's a small piece of history that will just never ever die and that will
Of course.
always live on. Like we could have like a nuclear apocalypse and there will still be phone booths surviving it. Like that's kind of
Yeah, the
I
last
like that.
traces
Yeah, exactly. The last
of the
traces of man
civilization.
is just a phone booth. I love that as a concept. That's incredible. So following on from Paradigm Shift, you then released No Breaks in
Yeah,
collaboration with a BBC Comedy Central Huffington Post writer.
that's
Um,
excellently said. Yeah.
I did my research. So you've done this collaboration. You've released No Breaks as well. So my first question on this is, after Paradigm Shift and the success of that, was it easy to get No Breaks out because your name was out there? You were able to, I suppose, collaborate with different people, or was it essentially like the start of the process again that you had with Paradigm Shift, where you had to come up with a new concept, new idea, and just go from square one, albeit with this new knowledge of writing?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. Did release No Breaks towards the end of the same year when I published Paradigm Shift, and I initially didn't expect it to come out in 2022. I was aiming for more like 2023. But when I hit Jamie, who sort of served as my sort of advisor and editor on that, and that was the collaborator that you mentioned, he initially he wanted to know a little bit more about me and what the book was about. And I think what made the collaboration successful and what made it really like happen and have that sort of impact was I could now say I'm a published author.
Yeah.
Whereas before, if I was still working on Paradigm Shift or the book hadn't been released, I couldn't say I was a published author. I could just say that I was some a secondary school kid who was writing on his computer, which isn't necessarily an impressive portfolio, who's someone who's so used in journalism and performs these services and helps people out and publishes his own work and makes his own movies and wins awards for it. That isn't something that that would have been, quite as impactful. So I definitely think that the fact that I already published Paradigm Shift helped me with that. As far as publication went, having already published the book made it so much easier, because rather than reaching out and writing emails to people for months, as I had done when Paradigm Shift was finished in 2021, actually. So when Paradigm Shift was finished, it was around October or November of 2021. And then in 2022, I spent around like 3 or 4 months, somewhat like bridging into the year, just writing to people and trying to get my name out there. And rather than doing that, it was way easier to just email a copy of No Breaks to some of the people who I had been making these deals with and saying, hey, by the way, I have this like new shorter book that I had written with collaboration with this guy. Here's his like IMDb page. Here's like the Wikipedia pages of the movies and books that he's worked on. And I think it would be cool to release this like right after, so that if people are not interested in buying the longer book, we could release this instead. And I'll even throw in the audiobook for free. I'll get it done. And they thought, wow, like, yeah, totally, we could do this. Whereas if I hadn't had found a publisher for Paradigm Shift, No Breaks would have stayed like the many other projects that I have somewhere in my computer, like somewhere in a folder, and would probably never have gotten published. So relatively, it was the quickest process I've ever had for getting like my work out there. And I think that was absolutely thanks to the prior, I guess you could call it, success for Paradigm Shift, though the book had just started selling. So yeah.
Yeah, very good. Brilliant. So then in terms of writing No Breaks, what is the writing process like whenever you're a co-author with somebody else? Is it a case of you maybe both write the first chapter, send it on to each other, kind of compare, and then mix and match? Or what was like the specific process that you guys had when writing No Breaks?
Yeah, so initially when I was set on writing No Breaks, when I had the initial idea, it was meant to be this very short continuous story. Paradigm Shift was divided into dozens and dozens of small chapters. I wanted this to be one continuous story that someone could just pick up, and there will be specific points at which they can stop. I've known people that read the book in 1 to 2 days. So to me, that was very impressive that someone could just sit down and read my work and understand what it was. And the fact that it was shorter meant that it would be more comprehensive. So originally, I wasn't looking for a collaborator. I was more of just looking for an editor to fix the grammar mistakes and make sure that everything is polished out. But what Jamie suggested to me was that I would write specific parts of the book. And then as I'm writing the next parts, I don't call them chapters because the book wasn't in the end divided into chapters, but we did separate them into various documents. Yeah. As I was writing the next part, he would revise over the last part. And then in addition to like fixing everything and making it seem all smooth and polished according to his knowledge, he would add in small ideas to that chapter that I could later go back and implement. So I would get the first document ready. I would send it over to him. He'd do the work in that document, leave some ideas in. By the time that he would do that, I would have document 2 and 3 ready. He would then go on to them. I would go back and forth between writing the new chapter and then, modifying some things in the first one. That helped a lot with the continuity of the book, because with the first document that I had sent to him, he had put in some ideas for the very start of the book. And because I wasn't finished with writing the book yet, as soon as I got those ideas back, I was like, hey, yeah, let's throw this into the first few pages of the book. And the part that I'm writing now, I'll continue this sort of story so that by the time that Jamie gets it, he knows that it's correlated, and then he can give some more ideas on how to end it. So a bunch of the actual stories that came with Paradigm Shift, the little, not Paradigm Shift, sorry, no breaks, but Paradigm Shift largely as well, though I didn't have an editor on that one or a collaborator of any sort. A lot of the stories that ended up making it into no breaks, such as the little like characters, it's basically a road trip tale of a man that is leaving this organization and trying to pick up its leader. He goes from a different part of Nevada in the United States, from Carson City to Reno, which is around a 2-3 hour drive. And all of this is like his introspection and his lookouts and all of the places he stops and all the people he meets. All of those different characters really came from the fact that Jamie put like in little notes, like saying, hey, maybe we should flesh this chapter a lot out more. Maybe you should bring this guy back, or maybe he should stop somewhere. And then I would just make these little notes. And later, as the book was getting finished, it was a really quick process. So I just kept referring back to the same things that started the story. So the thing that I've heard from a lot of the people who have read No Breaks or even listened to it, because we did end up publishing it as a 2-hour audiobook to many platforms, and for many of them it came out for free because I just wanted to get people interested in my writing to have a category of things that they could listen to before they actually purchased the Paradigm Shift or any of my other books or projects. Eventually, what happened was the people that had listened to it or read it told me that they liked the continuity of the book, that there was nothing at the beginning of the book that wasn't resolved later. And that was all thanks to Jamie, because I collaborated with him on the process actively. He didn't write any of the chapters, but what he did was he would go back to the parts that I had written, and then he would write a little bit and then leave in a note on the document saying, Jacob, you should take this off here, and then you should continue the story later. I'm like, okay, good. So by the time that all of the documents were finished and I could combine them into this one book, I sent it to him again for review. He touched down on some of the final grammar mistakes. He threw out some parts that weren't necessary, and then he said, okay, this is like a general sketch of the continuity that you have in this book of all these different stories that are happening. I think this is good to go. If you want to make some final changes, feel free to. I did make some final changes. I did make some like brief last minute modifications, but I was so excited about the way that the book was looking that I just automatically, like one evening, went on my computer, sent it via email to someone, and I said, hey, look, I got this new book if you guys want it. And it just took a couple of days for the publishing process to start before Jamie could even reply to me with the final notes. So I was very ahead of myself. But I think the collaboration necessarily did help, because the book wouldn't have looked the same without it. No Breaks is an entirely different feel from Paradigm Shift.
So do you feel like in terms of when you're writing a book in collaboration with somebody else, as a writer, is it hard to put aside, say you have like a particular vision of what you want to do, what you want to add into your story, but then your collaborator comes back with a note saying, no, this might not make sense, maybe take this out, maybe replace it with this. Is it hard to kind of like compromise in terms of that? Or is it just, do you have to put it aside and just as a writer be like, okay, for the sake of the story, this is what makes sense, this is what we go with?
Yeah, man, great question. Look, I think a lot of people who are authors do often deal with that, even if they're like film directors or just making videos up on YouTube and their editor tells them to get it out. I think a lot of people do have some creative ideas that they want to keep, and it's very important to them. And I think that at the very beginning, I was very much afraid of my good ideas being thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized that I was never the sort of person to get very sentimental about something that I had just written.
Yeah.
Like exactly how it was with Paradigm Shift, the whole entire draft of the book that I had at first finished, I haven't even looked at it since I had begun writing the final copy. When Paradigm Shift was published, it's not like I looked at that first draft and I compared everything. I understood the initial ideas and I remembered everything that I had written, but I didn't look back on it at all, because I thought that, well, there's multiple ways to take a story. And if you dwelled on all the different ways where the story could have gone, if you had just done something a little bit different, or if you had kept this passage, you'd get an infinite array of like different solutions to these conflicts, to different endings, different multiple paragraphs that you could have put in there. And really, at the end of the day, it was no big deal to me. If someone was talking to me a secondary school kid at the time, and they had expertise in writing in all these different fields, and they had accomplished things and won awards when I was still like watching TV at 5 or 6 years old. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna take that advice to heart, and maybe I'll put in a little note here or there, like, hey, here's how I wanted to finish this story. Maybe put that in the next book. Maybe make a next
Yeah.
book where this sort of thing goes this way. But I wanted to take as much criticism and advice as I possibly could, because I understood my limitations, and that nobody hears, oh, here's a book by a 16, 17-year-old, and they think, wow, this is going to be the greatest book of all time. Like, if you told me now, here's a book written by a young teenager, I would think to myself, I really hope this isn't bad.
Yeah,
Like,
of
it's
course.
impressive nonetheless, but a lot of people are going to think, because the writer is less experienced, obviously the value is going to be lower. So I didn't want to have anything of that sort, and I think a collaboration was very valuable, because then I got somewhat of actual expertise in the industry to help me with the book. And I really do like how No Breaks came out. And when people ask me what book of yours should I read first, I always say No Breaks, because it's shorter, it's more concise. I'm more proud of Paradigm Shift. It's definitely more defining like achievement of my life and literary career. But No Breaks is just so much cleaner, because I've had that expert help. So I didn't feel nostalgic about throwing anything out at all, though I do think that's pretty common among authors.
Of course. And I think it kind of goes like to the point where art is a subjective thing. You know, you could write a book, you could do anything. Some people will like it, not everybody will necessarily. But then at the same
Of
time,
course.
as you say, you can always take another idea that gets like scrapped from one book, put it into another. So then ideas, creativity, it's a constant infinite flow of art,
Mhm.
really, which is like the beautiful thing about it. So when it came to writing both Paradigm Shift and No Breaks, probably more Paradigm Shift, especially when it came to like the release period, did you feel like there was maybe like this kind of pressure on you due to your age? Because just to touch on a point that you said there, you know, when you read a book that is written by a teenager, you know, the first thing you're thinking is you want it to be good. Did you feel that kind of pressure yourself at 17 releasing like a huge novel?
No, I definitely did feel that kind of
Yeah.
pressure. And but I think it manifested differently than you might imagine, because the first thought that I really had when I saw that the book went live in April, early April of 2022, I thought to myself, I really hope many years later, in these upcoming years, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, and so on, I'm not going to look back at this and think, wow, I really made a mistake by publishing this book.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, this wasn't polished already at all. I haven't gotten much of those thoughts, but at the time, I was very afraid that the book
Yeah.
would end up feeling unfinished, or that something was wrong with it, and then I'd regret having published it in the first place and not worked more on it. But there was also a sense of pride to the fact that I had managed to do it before the age of 18, and I didn't even know much until a while later that my book, someone informed me, it had exceeded the record by I believe like Jesus, like 40,000 words
Oh, wow.
to the previous book. It was 40,000 words longer than the previous longest book that was written and properly published by a person under 18 years of age. So I was like, hey, this is not a world record that is recognized by Guinness. At least I don't believe not yet. I haven't gotten in touch with them, because it's not something that was on my priority list. But everywhere you look up on the internet, books published by teenagers or young adults, I believe there's even a Wikipedia page. All of them are short manuscripts. And I think a lot of that is because they were attributed to their own era in the 1950s or 60s. It's not like these tools were as easy to
Yeah.
manipulate. You can have Microsoft Word or all these different tools. You can reach out to people through email. So really, someone during that time had no options. I remember there were screenplays that were written in Eastern Europe that were written by 15, 16-year-olds, and they got their parents or relatives or uncles or aunts to release them and direct them or put them in theaters. Because they were not allowed to actually publish them by themselves. I remember back in the day, I was reading about the fact that you couldn't release published works just under 100 years ago if you weren't married. You couldn't release them if you were a woman. You couldn't release them if you were like not a landowner. So people obviously had different priorities, and the fact that people didn't read as much
Yeah.
100 years ago as they do now, the literacy rate, it prohibited a lot of people. But I think it was surprising to me that even in the most recent years, even over the past 20 years, when people have this widespread internet access, and that nobody had actually ever done this before. And the closest example I could find was like 100,000 word manuscript that was kind of published that was written by a 12-year-old girl. But that was done because the said person was homeschooled and her
Mhm.
parents were rich. And it was a random stroke of luck, if I remember it. I'm not going to name the author of the book because I don't want to slander it.
Of course.
But I do remember that they had emailed like a publisher of some sort, and the publisher had instantly replied. And they thought the book was so good that they ordered like 10,000 copies of it. That just didn't happen to me. I wrote to around 30 to 40 publishers before I actually started receiving proper responses. But one of the most annoying things that I found was some of the publishers that had eventually responded to me were vanity publishers. So they're trying to get me to pay to
Uh-huh.
publish my book, which didn't make any sense to me because money wasn't the main prerogative that I had.
Yeah.
But at 16, 17 years old, you can't really pay like a company somewhere in like Delaware or Pennsylvania thousands of dollars to publish your book, so that when people ask you, "Oh, how much did they pay you for this book?" I can say, "Oh no, it was me. I had to pay for your 4,000. I
Yes,
wasn't going
that's.
to do
I'm
any of
actually
that."
at a loss for having done this.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to make deals. I wanted. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a episode of it's a British television series for those unacquainted. Peep Show,
Yes.
and Mark Corrigan publishes a book, but it turns out that the publisher that he's trying to publish with is a vanity publisher, and so he goes back to his roommate Jess, and he's like, "Oh, how much did you earn for this book?" Nothing yet. And then he throws this like giant party, and nobody comes, and it's. I didn't want to end up like that guy. I think because of having watched that as well, I was just like, no,
Yeah,
okay,
of course.
screw off with these vanity publishers. I have enough of this shit. I'm just gonna wait a couple months until I hear back from someone. So yeah, I definitely felt like there was a lot of pressure. I wanted to make a good example for future offers, but I didn't want to screw up with the actual publishing and production process. I thought that if I looked back upon it many years later, it's something that I wanted to be like proud of, and not just here's some shit that I wrote like ages ago,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to show this to anyone, right?
Of course, like, and it is something you really do have to like throw yourself into as well. And you raised an interesting point, saying about how with the age of the internet, the digital age, where everything is accessible to everybody, more so
Yep.
than it was like 20 years ago, for example,
Yeah, of course.
even 10 or 15 years ago. So like, why aren't more people doing this? Like, was there any form of like deterrent of sort of writing something in this age, and especially when it came to like COVID times? Obviously, with COVID, who didn't have spare time, kind of thing, you know. But was there a sort of thing like, you know, you're writing a book, like you got a hard copy book, like, but we're in a digital age. Was there a sort of kind of thought process behind, okay, how do I release this? Do I stick to the hard copy, or do I just kind of try and go digital with it? Like, obviously there is an element of both, but in terms of your thought process going into this.
Yeah, dude, that's an amazing question. So I'll touch upon it very quickly, but shortly, because you mentioned the process of COVID. So as I mentioned, when I started writing the book, I was 13 years old. So I actually had some earlier ideas for it. So when I began the idea that I wanted to write a book, it was 2015 or 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really long ago. It doesn't seem that long ago now because of COVID. Our brains are perma stuck in 2020.
Yeah.
So when I think of 2010, I'm just like, oh, that was 10 years ago. Oh, no, never mind. Like more like 15. But I still think of 2016 as 4 years ago, and that's insane for me. But aside from that, I had these ideas a long time ago, and I had just been caught up with all these sorts of drafts, all these sorts of ideas for different books that I wanted to write. I was convinced that those weren't stories that I wanted to actually put out there, and I said that a lot over in the past. And then around like 2019, this is an element that I actually incorporated in Paradigm Shift. I had to wake up, and this is a very unique situation. I promise I'll answer your question.
No, of
I
course,
had to wake up. My secondary school, it was not a private secondary school. It was a public school, and that has a different definition in America than it does in the UK. But over in America, public school is much less prestigious than it would be somewhere here in the UK. It's much more like a poor state school,
Mm-hmm.
but although it's funded by the government. So in order to get to my public school, which had accepted me into this like gifted program, so this is for people who scored very high on test scores, I needed to get around like 20 or 30 miles to my school. So I was extremely lucky because my house was just on the farthest reaches of the area that the bus system actually served. And it was for a bunch of schools, it was for a bunch of different institutions. So I could just get on the bus and they could get me there every morning or after school. The only problem was because it was like a 20, 30-mile journey. I with the school actually starting at 6 a.m., I would need to wake up at around 3 or 4 a.m. and then walk around half an hour to the bus stop so that
Damn.
I could make time for 4:50 a.m. To get to eat breakfast, to shower, to get to the bus stop. Then the bus would drive around for an hour and a half, picking up everyone else. And then by 6, I would have to be in the classroom where I would remain up until 4 p.m. So
Wow.
writing a dystopian fiction novel in those conditions wasn't very difficult because I could just look like it's the allegation of like French philosopher that school is a prison. It felt exactly the same to me,
It's,
especially with my
yeah.
like teenage mind. I felt like, okay, I could just look at the world around me. I could write from that. So back to your initial questions, and the COVID pandemic. I began looking at the COVID pandemic in around like 2018, 2019. I always it felt kind of bad about it because the first time that I had actually heard about it, it was not called COVID at all. It was called nCoV-19. I was looking at the news. They were talking about like, oh, someone ate bat soup in Wuhan in China, and now there's like a couple cases of it. I believe the first time that I looked at it, and there was a John Hopkins University website where you could see every single COVID case. There was, I believe, 18 COVID cases in China, and there was 2 in the United States, and there was 1 in France. And I was just like, man, I really hope there isn't a single COVID case in Florida. That would really suck because I'm in school here, and then the school would shut down. I was planning a trip to the UK because I always liked visiting here. I always liked living here for these brief periods. I live here for right now currently because I'm doing a bunch of stuff here. But I always I was very hyped up for that trip. I believe I wanted to go to like London and Bristol and some of the areas above it for that single trip, and then just stay there for a couple of weeks, visit some people, and then my mother suggested to me, well, this COVID thing that you brought up, because she didn't even know it existed prior to me bringing it up. If this gets out of hand, then we might not be able to actually go on the trip. And I said, that's ridiculous. Like a virus somewhere in China won't stop us from getting on the trip. That's so stupid. Why would that ever happen?
Famous last words.
Anyway, yeah, a couple of weeks later, they told us that we would be having 2 weeks off of school. And for the next year, I was basically stuck in my room writing this book. So I thought that was to excuse the use of the phrase, that was a total paradigm shift for me. And I thought it would be interesting, like, to take that time to write it. I thought it was a sort of nudge on me from some like greater force that I had been trying to write a novel for years, but had been too focused on school. And then a disease named the novel coronavirus came along, and they forced me inside of my room, and I can't do anything but write a novel. So that was the ultimate push to shove, and I really had nothing else to do. So while I was locked in for that year, the latter half of the book was finished. The first part was already done before the pandemic had arose. I had already had the original ideas. There was a small segment of people being locked inside their rooms that I had written before the pandemic, and I actually removed most of it during the pandemic because I thought people, after it came out, people would be like, oh, this is so cheesy. This is like too modern day for me. There are certain aspects of the dystopian fiction that I had actually removed because I felt like they would be too familiar to people.
Yeah.
Like they would think like this dystopian fiction book is too inspired by real life. This like political thriller, I'm reading it to find it fun and to get some philosophical insights, not to feel depressed about myself. And it was written from first person as well. So I was like, okay, back to your question. Hardcover or soft cover? This was the initial question that I had after I had actually finished writing the book during the COVID era. And I wanted to know how people would receive it. A lot of the publishers had slowed down actually in the beginning stages of the pandemic because people were going long distance, but eventually the media industry began to pick up because people were just sitting at home. So I found that there was a huge demand for these sorts of books. They gave me the option when I initially got in contact with the agency that was actually helping me publish. This is one of the agencies that didn't ask me to wire transfer them £3,000 or £4,000 or dollars to their headquarters somewhere far, far away so they can publish my book. This is someone that I actually offered to help, and I got an initial contact at that firm. And they said, do you want it in paperback or hardcover. And I was spending a day or two looking up the initial benefits of both of these copies. And I phoned them and I said, I probably want it in paperback. And they say, okay, great, because then we can get more of the books out, and that's going to cost us less, and you're going to earn more. And I'm like, why didn't you just start with that? You could have just told me that, and I would have done research. I would have just picked the paperback. But in addition, I also told them that I wanted very much to do the audiobook within the next year. So we did most of it, but Paradigm Shift is such an intensive 176,800 word book of around 90 something short chapters, almost 100, where finding someone to narrate such an audiobook or to edit the narration or to literally just get it out on the internet, even posting it anywhere, because the final product ended up being many, many hours long. It's like one of those thick Robert Greene books, like 48 hour, where you can read through it like for a number of years and you don't get to the end, or like Mastery, which is even longer. But these books, I found it extremely difficult to publish them in an audiobook format at first. So I said to my publisher, hey, people are locked up inside their homes. A lot of people are reading on their Kindles. The first platform that we should publish it on should be like Amazon Kindle. We should get it to all of those old people who like to read in their spare time still, on their like little iPads. And I feel like we could make a buck off of that. So the initial Kindle publication, within the first week or two, the Amazon listing had been long taken down. We replaced it once the paperback book actually came along, because we needed to sell them both at one place for easy navigation. But the initial copies of like 50 to 100 Kindle sales within the first week actually helped pay for costs of designing the actual cover, off of marketing the book, off of making it look not bland, off of adding the various drawings. So as I mentioned, when you look up Paradigm Shift on Google Images, there's a bunch of drawings of the main characters and of the various like ships and of the various vehicles, the world building elements of the book, how the hubs are designed and whatnot. And I thought that was very important to get that out, so then people could post it on social media and be like, hey, this is not just a random book that I found somewhere. It has actual like story elements to it. And it reminds me of this one very lesser known book. I don't even remember what it was called. I think I do actually remember. It was called The Last Spaceship from Earth. It was a science fiction book by John Boyd, which was set in this like transhumanist future, many years in the future. It was released in the 1960s, and it only became adapted to ebooks much later on. The idea was this alternate history universe where it had something to do with the early beginnings of Christianity and how it, instead of like spreading by the book, it spread by the sword. And then it became this like technocratic society very early on. And it had some sort of history, alternate history behind it, but it was mainly just a science fiction book with like these very archaic, like warlike roots, sort of like Warhammer and the Empire of Man and all that science fiction stuff. And I thought it was quite interesting that books like that could still get attention many, many years later, simply because they achieved some sort of notoriety online. Someone posted them somewhere, and they said, hey, this is a book where like Jesus had a crossbow and he was like a badass, and then now they have spaceships, and people looked at it and they were like, oh, now there's like a ebook copy of this book. Now I can actually read it for myself instead of having to order a hardcover from some like store in Illinois or in France or in Paris, and I could just get it for myself. And that gets a lot of people really reading it. So the initial idea was to just get it out on the digital platforms first. And then as we came to the endings of the pandemic and people could actually go to bookstores to sell it to all of these different bookstores, I even gave it to some libraries and bookstores for free. I ordered the offer copy for very cheap, so that as many people as I could at the smallest markup possible could get the book at first, so that they could actually spread the word. Yeah. I counted on the fact that if my work was good enough, then I wouldn't need to do much marketing. That people would just recommend it by themselves, that there wouldn't need to be any force involved, because it would be something that would gain acclaim. And I'm very proud of the fact that I was mostly correct in that. So
yeah, absolutely. Especially with becoming like known worldwide. Like that's an incredible achievement, especially like at the age you are, to be in your first novel. And as you say, you had like no editor. It was just all 100% you. Being able to finish the second half locked in your bedroom, like in, as you said, Paradigm Shift, which is incredible. So aside from being an author, there are other things you do. So part-time video editor, and to wind back the clock a number of years, You have worked a lot with Mr. Beast being his first video editor.
Yeah, I
Uh,
have a lot of. Yeah, yeah. Go
yes,
on.
sorry. So I was just, how did that come about? Because like I'm just at around the same time, that would have been around the same time maybe that you started writing Paradigm Shift. So
Yeah,
you're doing video editing around 13, 14.
yeah.
How did that come about?
That's a really interesting question. When I tell this story, a lot of people don't believe me, and it's not until I show them the proof that they actually do. Which I'm more than welcome to show you at any time. I also made a couple of videos about it, but they never gained. No, one did gain some traction, but that was on another platform, not YouTube. So overall, the story of it is, in around 2014, I was still like 10 years old, and I know this is very early age, and a lot of kids that they don't do much of anything. I was very big into video games. I was very big into just staying in my room, just playing on my laptop. My parents never really got me a console, so I was never able to actually play those like Nintendo games unless I came to my friend's house, and then we
Yeah.
would play like Mario Party or Mario Kart or something like that, or we would play Zelda when Nintendo Switch came around. Largely, I was just stuck to playing on my little laptop. Because I couldn't launch many games, what I ended up doing was I ended up watching a lot of YouTube and watching a lot of people play those games. Back in those days, there were a couple of creators that I really liked. This was 2015, 2016 YouTube. And just as a reminder, I was, of course, like 13, around 13 years old at the time. And in those 3 years between then, I had gone from basically like experimenting with little web games on my laptop to actually recording them. At very first, I didn't even start editing videos onto YouTube. I would make these little animations, or I would just screen record myself playing some web games. They had those little web games that like Sliderio, Agario back in the day in 2015
Yeah.
that you could just play on your browser. I would record myself playing those games. I would put music on top of it. I would post them to alternative sites. Back then, they didn't have like Rumble or anything like that. They had Daily Motion, they had Vimeo, all of these sites. And then I would post these little Let's Plays, and then I would go on random like Twitch streamers' streams, and I would copy and paste my link and trying to say, hey, can you give me a shout out? Hey, can you give me a shout out? Hey, can you give me a shout out? Um, so I did that around 100, 200 times. That didn't work a single time, except for when I made a Twitter account. And of course, I wasn't able to make a Twitter account because I was still like 11 or 12 at the time.
Mhm.
But I wanted to spread the word of my little like Vimeo Daily Motion Let's Play as far as possible as I could put it. I tried to get it as far out because people didn't really go on those platforms. They just went on those platforms to see pirated movies. And like old German art films translated into English. Nobody like gave a shit about my little recording. So what I did was I just started going on like every Twitch streamer like Twitter, and just following everyone that they followed, and being like, hey, like here's my little like video. I have a little editing thing. Do you wanna see my Vimeo? Do you want to see that Daily Motion channel? It has 100 videos. They're all of me like a couple hours ago screwing around on my computer, and there's no audio because I don't want to reveal my voice. And it has like copyright free music in the background. But please trust me, this is gonna be a big one. Um, so it's funny looking back at it, judging by what came from it. Eventually, what happened was I got in touch with a bunch of creators that were in like 5,000, 10,000 subscriber range over Skype and Twitter. And I offered a bunch of them that I could edit their videos for free. I had my mom's old MacBook Air. That was the only laptop that I could access that had editing software of any sort on it. So I would send myself, 12 years old, like these files from one of the other laptops, or even a school laptop, all the way back then. When I could get my hands on it, I would attend the little like computer labs that they had after school in the library, so that I could send these videos to my mom's MacBook Air, so that I could edit it on the MacBook. So then I came back home. I stole the MacBook basically while she was out, and then I would edit these little videos. I would add some effects. I would add some title text. I would clip it. Eventually, I learned something really interesting that I could do in iMovie, which is I could zoom into like the specific web cameras, and then I could do the same thing that these large like creators like PewDiePie were doing at the time. And I thought, okay, this is amazing. I'm like making actual editing progress. And then I watched a video. I can't remember if it was on Twitter or on YouTube, where it said that you actually don't have to edit with iMovie, and it's actually a really crappy software, and that there's this like a little link to this website where you could get another editing software, this editing software called Adobe Premiere Pro. And I was like, oh, what's this? oh, what's Sony Vegas? Oh, what's this little software where I could like mask people's faces and I can make things like move along with their faces, and I could add special kinds of effects and zoom ins and do various animations like I was doing on my mom's MacBook Air, but in person. So I was really wondering about that. And then I did end up downloading the software. I had reached out to some of those creators over Twitter. I had watched a few of their videos. I tweeted back and forth with them. And what I did was I screen recorded with OBS, which I had just gotten at the time, some of their videos, and I had zoomed into their faces to like music at like I basically did funny moments compilations.
Yeah.
I tweeted that at one of the creators. Uh, his handle at the time was Mr. Beast YT. He had 2,000 followers, and he followed me back and retweeted that post, which was very exciting for me because at that time I was traveling with my mom in Europe because she was taking me somewhere to see family. And I remember I was looking like at the first phone I had gotten. It was an iPhone 4. And I was looking at the back and I saw like this notification on this tiny little screen that said like someone followed you on Twitter. And I was like, oh my God, my 20th follower. I'm so happy. And then after he retweeted it, he had 2,000 followers. So it got like 50 likes. I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that some like a little edit that I made on my phone got 50 likes. So I was 12 at the time, going on 13. Once I got to 13, I noticed that this creator was picking up traction. So I offered to add him on Skype. I offered to edit a bunch of his videos. What I would do was, because I didn't know any of these Drive or Google sharing sites, was I would just literally screen record with OBS the stuff he would send me. This is so amateur. Or I would literally take position my phone in just the right order and increase my volume up so as much as I can, and then record it with the little iPhone 4, like my laptop screen. And then I would polish it up so it wouldn't look like it was recorded my phone. And I learned how to do that really well. And then I would transition them onto my computer, and I would add little with Adobe Premiere Pro or Sony Vegas or whatever. I would add the little title screens or whatever. And I did that in late 2016 and early 2017 for a bunch of these different gaming YouTubers and creators. And at the time, this guy, Jimmy Donaldson, or Jimmy as I just knew him over Skype and Twitter, he was collaborating a lot with other people. He was he got just out of his stage of making gaming videos on this game called Battle Pirates, and then Minecraft mods, and then he started making these videos with his face in it. He had this giant sticker of Asian man. He would call it giant Asian sticker on his wall, and he started a series called Worst Intros, where he would look at the worst. When you look at my first video on YouTube and you sort by upload date, you're gonna find a real bunch of really crappy videos made by kids. So what he wanted to do, and what he told me and a bunch of other people over Skype, was he was gonna take those videos and then he was just gonna make a compilation clowning on them. And he had this bit where he was drinking he had these bottles of Windex or bleach that he showed us, that he filled them with water, and he would drink them whenever something would be really cringy on those videos. And a bunch of those early videos, I was the one that edited parts of them. What I would do is I would screen record the clips that he would send me, or literally even just post on his timeline, the little bits. And then I would instant message him, because we had followed each other over Twitter. And I would be like, hey, I edited this video. I would upload it to YouTube, because I had actually learned how to use YouTube by this point, surprisingly enough, from watching all these people. And I would send him the link, and I would tell him to download it. I don't know how he downloaded it. I didn't know at the time how he downloaded it. I didn't know that you could download the videos out of YouTube. All I knew was just recording with my phone, my laptop screen. But surprisingly, a lot of them did make it onto the channel. A bunch of them are still up, I believe, last time I checked, a year or two ago. Some of them got taken down because I guess they were too edgy, or YouTube wanted them down, or he didn't want his reputation associated with that. A lot of them got re-uploaded to other archive channels. But with the Worst Intro series, that was pretty much where my collaboration with him began and ended. Mm-hmm. So just a couple months after that, I was writing to him incessantly. When he got to 50,000 subscribers, I was just like, hey man, congratulations. There's 100 people watching your stream. Can I be mod on your stream? Hello, do you have any new videos I could edit? I was 13 or 14 at the time. I really wanted that clout. I really wanted to become a big time editor. And at the time I really didn't know how to do it, because all these other creators I've been working with weren't doing so good. So I talked to one of my friends who was also very big into making shitty little Minecraft Let's Plays on YouTube, and we would make them together, and it was tons of fun. But around the same time, I had told my friend, hey, like there's this YouTuber I've been editing for, and he's getting really big. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. He's got like 30,000 subscribers. It can't be that big. It's not gonna get anywhere. I'm just like, no, but you don't understand. Like I was there for like 2,000, 5,000. Like I started editing from the very beginning. Like if he keeps following me, I just gotta message him more and more and ask him like the more stuff that I could edit. I got in touch with this is a whole nother thing, and I really don't want to touch on it because it's like a political topic. But uh, uh, at the time, one of his earliest collaborators, the Jimmy's roommate, I believe for the longest time after he told us that he moved out of his mom's house, was the person now known as Ava Chris Tyson. And at the time, that person went by the name of Crisscross Applesauce on YouTube, had a small channel of around 1,000 subscribers, and on this channel, basically all that was on it. The idea was that commentary YouTubers were very big at the time. So people like Leafy is here, Pyrocynical, small videos like that, where they would take small videos and they would react to them. They were basically reaction channels. There were other reaction channels by the same name, like Jinx and whatever. And because I was a kid, I used to watch a lot of that, or these various drama channels. What he wanted to do, Jimmy, that is, was to try to expand his network as much as possible. He set up something called Beast Network, which is so antiquated. I don't know if anyone still talks of this, but this is something that actually happened. There was these multi-channel networks, very similar in order to Machinima. And I'm sorry, but this is a very long story.
No, that's okay, dude.
Very
It's okay.
similar. And he knew that this is a way to gain money. We had each other added on Reddit. I still know of his old Reddit account where he would ask on the r/Bitcoin subreddit, like what he should invest in. Keep in mind, this is 2015, 2016. So a lot of very prodigious stuff was happening back then. But then someone on Reddit apparently suggested to him, and if you told us that they suggested to him to start a multi-channel network, and a bunch of his fans had also made like alternate accounts where they were interacting with his content and he was reacting to their content. So he wanted to get them all into this network. Well, 2 months later, YouTube had banned literally all multi-channel networks like Machinima off of their platform for their scummy practices. And Jimmy had just started earning money off of it. So he got his roommate to set up that small channel with 1,000 subscribers that the person now known as Ava Chris Tyson made. At the time, the aim of that channel was just to post, for these commentary channels and these drama channels, just to post these gameplay videos that they could use as background footage. Yeah. So whenever these channels would talk about various drama things or various events, they would put this like CSGO surfing footage or something of the sort. I didn't even play these games. I didn't know what was happening with them. But I reached out to Jimmy's roommate and I offered to record some of my own footage of various games. So what I would do is I would just download games off the internet. I would record that footage and I would send it to them. And I believe at one point they had both followed me on Twitter. My interactions with Jimmy's roommate were really limited. I just sent like the various gaming videos. Sometimes I would literally tweet it at them, and then they would download it and they would upload it to the channel, which was then like taken down in parts. It was taken down like early 2017 when Jimmy's channel actually began blowing up and they began collaborating together more on the actual videos and getting sponsors for the first time in history after the Worst Intro series. But at the time, it was basically like an arrangement, like, okay, like I would send you stuff for your channel, I would edit for Jimmy, and then I could be your go-to editor. Well, surprise, surprise, when someone starts gaining money, and I don't entirely fault either of them for this, but they no longer saw the services of 13-year-old me recording my laptop screen of my phone on Premiere Pro and adding these little captions necessary. They would still read my things from time to time. And I got up to 200 followers, which was insane to me at that time. Like, whoa, 180 people like my stuff. I would go on the platform all day, every day. The account is now archived, but it's still up there. Made many, many years ago. I believe it was even made by one of my parents when I asked if I could have a Twitter account. It was like in 2012, 2013, 2014. So this is an account that I had for a while. This is something that I would use to like browse the internet, like art and from stuff and science fiction movies and games that I played. And that is where I would post my old Minecraft Let's Play. So it was still that account. It's very cringy. I typed a lot of very cringy things. People made response videos to me that were on YouTube for a long time where they were just laughing at stuff that I would post. that was also very incriminating to me. I was like 13 or 14. I was just like, man, people are calling me out on YouTube. This is 50 views now. It's the end of my life. Anyways, yeah, so the account did get a little bit of traction around that time. I'd swiftly moved on to editing for other people because Jimmy was no longer interested in having me edit his videos. Around the time that he reached 200,000 subscribers, I messaged him saying a message like, hey man, I'm so proud of you. Like, you got really this far. If you want me to edit your videos ever again, please let me know. And I don't remember exactly what he said. I included this in my first video on the subject. When I think he reached 100 million subscribers, like I came out with this whole story and I edited it and made it pretty. They got a couple hundred views, not too much. But basically, like, the summary of his response, he just said, oh, like, thank you, man, I appreciate it. And after that, I offered him 2 messages to edit a bunch more of his videos. And then one day I woke up, I believe it was, I don't know, like 2018, 2019, maybe even way earlier. I woke up and I checked my like notifications, my Twitter account. I saw that my following count went down, and I saw that Jimmy had unfollowed me. I think I DM'd his roommate soon after. His roommate didn't reply. And for about 3 or 4 months, I was like left undelivered there. And then I believe his roommate switched accounts or something like that, and he unfollowed me as well. So my ratio of the account stayed down. I still had the followers that I got from his like tiny little fandom, but by now he was growing so exponentially that the tweets that he had retweeted that had been on his timeline were now like buried. And I believe if someone had the dedication, if I had unprivated the unarchived account, and if someone had the dedication to scroll through thousands and thousands of Mr. Beast tweets, at the very bottom near the creation of his account would be his retweets of some of the like early memes that I had made. And even on YouTube, I had on my own archive channel that all the Minecraft Let's Plays and the little Agario videos were on. And all the different edits that I made for all these different gaming YouTubers. I still believe that I have a private video or two that he would actually post to his timeline, or videos that I had edited for him and sent him the link. And then he would post this to everyone. Very poorly edited videos, by the way. He would post this to everyone as you know, this video's done. Thank you so much, Jacob, or whatever my username was at the time. I don't even remember my nickname. I change it all the time. And he would just take these videos and he'll be like, hey, this is like fully edited. Thank you so much. Can I upload this? I'll be like, yeah, sure. So in the end, I don't entirely blame, that's how pretty much the collaboration got started and ended. I don't entirely blame him for like firing me, I guess the word would be. Although there was not really much, like I wasn't getting much money for it. Like not as certainly not as much money as you would think, but it's not like I even got $40, $20 for my collaboration. It wasn't that important at the time. And keep in mind, this is a kid that had just dropped out of college, and he was 18 or 19, and he was living with like his parents. And to me, at like 13 or 14, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. This is like a big YouTuber who's older than me, and I can do like all this cool editing stuff. And it just didn't work out in the end. So I don't entirely blame that the collaboration had ended. I don't entirely blame the fact that I had gotten very little, if any, money for it. But I do think that it is sort of funny that it just ended up like in there, like just all of a sudden I had gotten unfollowed, and I have never spoken to him again ever since then. What is funny though, one last note, I had noticed that when someone follows you on Twitter and you follow them back, you gain the ability to message them now. I don't know how it is now with Elon Musk's takeover and it being X and whatever, but I noticed that now, or how it was back then, if you gain the ability to message someone and you message them, even if you both unfollow each other at a certain point, you can still message that person. So my old archived account, and this is the proof that I've used to show people whenever they doubt me, whenever I show this up in person, whenever I bring it up, I try not to bring it up. When someone like brings this stuff up, I do often talk about it, and quite extensively, that is. Usually the proof that I would use is that I can still log into that old account, which I have on my phone right now. If it didn't log me out in the last couple of months or whatever, because it tends to do that. But I can still log into that account. I can still message him. All of the messages go to delivered. And on his end, all the messages will go to his like Twitter spam box. So he can't see it unless he clicks the spam box and all the other people that message him for bullshit reasons or to give them money. But I still have the ability to message him, which literally the vast majority of Twitter users don't have, which is what I would assume is the one proof that the most like quick and easy way to show someone that we had interacted in the past, that it can just tap on his profile, click message, and all of our past messages and DMs are in there. So I always just use that. I try not to bring it up. I try not to think about it. It's something that happened years and years ago. But just a couple of weeks ago, I was visiting my friend at a university here in England. And then I went to like the little university campus store that they had. And I remember when I was younger, my mom told me 2017 is too old to start a YouTube channel or be a video editor or to do any of that stuff. Of course, I've kept video editing since then, but that's a different story. I set up a service, and that's on my website, and I talked about it variously. But my mom in 2017 had told me, you better go looking for a job because it's too late in 2017 to start to be a big YouTuber. And you better pay attention in school and pay attention in geometry because that's very important for you. None of these like new avenues into this social media will make any money or get any big because all of these people are just trying to put themselves out there on the internet for likes, and it's just a fad that will go away. So I was just like, okay, like I still really like it, but I'll treat it more as a hobby. And so I paid attention in school. I wrote the novel I got out of school, and visiting my friend here at a university in England, in the south of England. And I go into the campus store, and there's this huge goddamn tray of it was his little like chocolate bars, the Mr. Beast like Feastables or whatever. And I'm just like, God damn it, man. Like, I could have just, like, not sent, you get this feeling a lot. I could have just, like, not sent a couple of those messages and not been, like, such a shitty editor. I could have, like, been smarter at 12 or 13 or 14, which is stupid to say. But I could have, like, tried to be a better editor. I felt in that moment, like, this surge that I've been feeling for the past few years where it's just, like, it's this strange feeling of me wishing that I had paid way less attention in school and spent much more time on my computer messing around. And that's not something that adults at the time told me at all was going to happen. They said what the opposite was going to happen. They said that I end up living in some small apartment with a wife that hates me and 4 children with shit in their diapers. And I would just be staying up all night, drinking beer and playing on video games. Whereas if I had actually like banked on the same ideas that I made, if I had put forward all of my might into staying on that one channel, not changing my name, onto editing for as many people as possible, onto being a good editor, onto making these connections, into being more professional. If ChatGPT was around at the time, I would have certainly used it to make myself seem more professional instead of making all these typos. I was still fairly new to English. I had only learned English as a language only a few years before then. And because before then I had lived and been raised all across Europe and went to those schools, and I hadn't really used English, even though my parents spoke it pretty well. They just spoke to me in like other languages. So I was just like, okay, man, like I gotta adjust to this new school life rather than sit on my laptop all the time. But back in the day, if those tools had been available to me, I would have certainly made use of them. I would have certainly made those connections, and I think things wouldn't have panned out the same way. And it does feel kind of angering sometimes, or at least it did back in the day, when I see, giving my like first fan like $100 million island, and I'm just like, oh, you paid me $10 to edit your video. So no, that's the like less than $10. So that's the entirety of it. That's the entire story, pretty much. It's insane. I know I spoke about it at length, and I didn't really get to have you talk,
Of course,
but
to know what you're worrying
it
about
is
that.
such an interesting, like, and long story that that seems unbelievable to a lot of people that I don't get to talk a lot about because it was so long ago.
No, of
But yeah,
course.
I've coped with these feelings now. I don't really feel much like the guilt or regret or the jealousy or whatever. I'm just like, oh, this is a funny story about my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things, you look back to the age you were then, like, excuse me, like 13, 14, and
Yeah,
it's the sort of, it's around that age, that's when you kind of like really experience the internet in its like purest form in terms of like social media. And obviously like being 13 or 14, like less than 10 years ago, for example, right?
yeah,
That was like sort of, it's, we'll put it this way, it was a hell of a difference compared to whenever I was 13, 14.
yeah,
And so you're on like social media at like that age, you're really kind of seeing, you're being able to interact with like all these like people from all across the world. Like I do think is an incredible thing that people do get connected and such away.
Yeah.
But there is also the element of like looking back, and I mean, I do this myself, and I look back to my first experiences on the internet 20 years ago, and I look back and think,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I conducted myself in a much, much better way back then. Like there's like a
Yeah.
real element of hindsight. And like you say, you know, you think about how different things could have been had maybe you just sort of prioritize things differently, had you done more with your editing. But and it's I mean, it makes me laugh because it's like there's this like horrible reminder that every time you go into like a sort of like a supermarket and you see these
Yeah.
Mr. Beast bars stacked up, it's like a reminder of
Yeah,
what could
no
have
one.
been.
I'm the only person in the. I feel like I'm one of the only people in the world, aside from maybe his ex-girlfriends or something, that whenever I see something that like reminds me of that stage of my life, I'm like, God damn it! Like it just reminds me how much I missed out. It's like that one guy who was in the Beatles just before they got signed, and he left to go to
Yeah,
university.
yeah,
The fifth Beatle, and you
yeah,
read that Wikipedia page, and it's that guy like became a mechanic, and he had a wife and like a kid, and then he like died of liver cancer or something, and that's his life story. He
yeah.
he got to carry the guilt of being the fifth Beatle throughout the rest of his life.
It's crazy. Like it is just it's an incredible thing, like, you know, looking back at what could have been, but like at the same time, given your later successes after that, I'm sure
Yeah,
you wouldn't have changed the thing because had
yeah,
you,
I
you know,
wouldn't have.
like
No.
because when it comes to things like that, you know, you look at YouTubers, particularly who have exponential growth such as that,
Mhm.
they must go between editor to editor,
Of
agents,
course,
all
yeah,
that
all the
kind of
time.
thing. It's such like there's so much attrition in terms of their personal workforce. It's
Hmm.
I think the fact that you're able to say that, you know, you did that was a part of your life.
Hmm.
No, I mean, coming up on what, 10 years or something
It
at
was
this point.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
It's
sorry, just to interrupt. It was inevitable that that would happen, but it's now a sort of Forrest Gump existence where I just live these random events and I get to look back. I'm like, yeah, see, that's what I
like
mean.
it's
But
incredible though.
in retrospect, I do wish that I would have locked in when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and instead of playing Minecraft, I would have bought Bitcoin.
No,
Took my mom's
you
money and bought Bitcoin, but you can't like look at it that way, you know?
man, I 100% get you. Like, because
Yeah.
I look back to whenever, like, even whenever Bitcoin was first introduced in like 2012, I look
Yeah.
back and think, I wish I knew about this because I had a little bit of money then. I could have put like, you know, £100 into that at that point and been like a freaking millionaire at some point very quickly, or 5 years later or whatever.
Man,
But
the first time that I heard about Bitcoin was like 2013, but keep in mind
yeah,
I was like a kid then. I didn't even have my own debit card or my own bank
hmm,
account. I barely had like a piggy bank. I had just like dollar bills that I got, not even dollar bills, like euro bills that I got for my birthday. And that they were just sitting around somewhere. I didn't know how to set up any of this wallet stuff.
yeah,
But I don't know if I said I the first time I heard it again, like 2012, 2013 as well. And if I had just known how to do this stuff, then I could have invested in it. Even more concerning is the fact that my mother had actually heard about this stuff. And to this day, she keeps always talking to me about it. Like, man, Jacob, did you know that I knew about Bitcoin in 2012 and 2013? And then I could have paid, I was thinking of putting all my money into it, but I didn't. I'm like, yeah, mom, you and like 100 million other people. Yeah, I wish you told me how to set up a wallet too, but it's like these are the opportunities that we miss in life. You
yeah.
know, it's not like before. We gotta get over it. We gotta write books, make more stuff. You know, that's what I'm
Absolutely,
doing.
yeah, absolutely. Because like in terms of hindsight, I have that, and also YouTube back in the day.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
YouTube was a weird one because there was almost like a sort of 5 to 10 year period where that seemed to be the easier time to get into YouTube. Now it's kind of
It's
like there's all the because
difficult.
everything's like so accessible to everybody. It's almost
Yeah.
as if now that people are turning back to YouTube right now
Hmm.
in comparison to the likes of, well, short form content, like long form content in its own right is coming back
Yeah, it
because
was TikTok for a number of years, and now,
yeah,
but
and TikTok's
yeah.
people are wise to TikTok at this point. Like people don't really see like the value in it, especially since the whole debacle with it in the United States.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like YouTube and long form content is kind of making a massive comeback at the moment. But the problem is YouTube's algorithm is kind of nuts, to be honest. It's incredibly like People can figure out Instagram's algorithm, people can figure out TikTok's, but YouTube, I think, is a fairly difficult one to crack. It's almost as if you kind of have to play off the what's trending at the moment kind of thing. But it's a bit
Yeah,
strange at the
man.
moment, I think.
Yeah, man. I think by helping my friend with his podcast, I did make a little bit of a comeback because it felt like such ages since I had been accustomed to like working with these large figures. And for his podcast, I had managed actually to get like do a debate with this streamer named Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
That was like half an hour long, and we had posted it to a bunch of other channels. We had this YouTuber. He's called like Self Help or whatever. I think he's more Manosphere adjacent. But we got a very long interview of him. He had like 600,000 subscribers. His online handle was like Home Math. I got a bunch of history YouTubers on, and I started talking to them about various like history topics. And it's just interesting getting back into YouTube now that I'm
Yeah.
like an adult. I have all this experience behind me because I'm like I have a whole new perspective on it. But what I don't like is it's not like the 2010s anymore.
Yeah.
Now YouTube is just I feel like overly saturated, and it's way more difficult to find like the real people on there. But I'm still glad that it's around, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Like, because if you were going to go on YouTube like 10 plus years ago, see, to get
Mhm.
monetized on YouTube, you just basically had to have an account. It was as simple as having an account.
Of
Whereas,
course, no, I remember that. You had just to verify your phone number and you would get monetized. That was it.
if even, yeah, like I remember, I think I was maybe about 16, 17, putting up YouTube videos, and I literally just like, they called it like being a YouTube partner back then. That's what
Mhm.
that was.
Yeah.
And I literally just filled in, like, the same account details that I had like on my actual YouTube page. And it was like, oh yeah, every video you post will be reviewed, and they could be monetized and stuff. I was like, cool.
Yeah.
But now it's like you have to jump through all these. Now you need to be, and I think this is kind of testament to the fact that it's so much more accessible to everybody else, and everybody else is doing it at the moment, that
Yeah.
you need to have this kind of high criteria. You need to have, I I don't know how many, so you need to have like X number of subscribers, X
Mhm.
number of hours of content watched over a rolling 30-day period, things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it is just like, it's absolutely insane. And to be honest, like, rightfully so, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, if it was monetized for everybody, then they wouldn't make a dime. Like, but on that note, tell us more about your YouTube then. So obviously you are the co-host of the Scorpion Movement podcast.
Yeah.
I know we just touched on it there a minute ago, but tell us a little bit more about that. What's the sort of premise of it, the concept, and a bit of insight into the sort of guests that you have on. Like, feel free to plug away at it here.
Sure, of course. So first of all, to respond to what you said, yeah, YouTube was way different back in the day. I remember when they used to have YouTube editors, and like that would like customize the homepage for everyone that was on it, rather than
Mm,
it just being an algorithm that nobody knows or can figure out, even the employees. Working like a For You page does on TikTok. Branching into the idea of the podcast, this was actually something that I was going to bring up. Was that the first guest that I had ever had on like my own show when I had run it way back in the day was the CEO and founder and lead programmer of Genius.com. So for those who are not familiar, Genius.com is the lyrics site. You can look up the artist or the single, and then it will give you all of the lyrics of that specific song or whatever. Or sometimes there would be even transcripts or documents, and they would get stuff on there. So the guy that had originally made it or put forward the concept that would initially literally compete with Google, and I believe there was a lawsuit going on with Google and Genius, and they were fighting over who gets to keep the title rights to the lyrics in the search engine, since neither of them owns it. I thought it was kind of stupid, but the guy that had actually made it, Makbot Mogdaham, I talked to him about this thing, and he had brought the lawsuit up, and we had like a 2-hour discussion that I later uploaded to YouTube. So me and Makbot initially got connected through like my little bit of the side, like programming and editing projects. We had video editing projects. We had both been into like Kanye West music. This was, keep in mind, please, this was like 2018, 2019.
before the
So
meltdowns.
yeah, before anything, while he was still married. Keep in mind all this. But yeah, So we had both just been starting to talk about concerts and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, I should record this for YouTube. And he's like, yeah, sure, dog. He always call everyone dog. Yeah, sure, dog. Go for it. So this guy with like a couple dozen thousand followers, verified on Instagram, DM me, and we started talking about all these social media platforms and whatever. So this is how the show started as well. But this is back to the question that you were talking to me about of how different YouTube was. So back in the day, YouTube and all these other platforms would let you monetize without anything. But then greedy Zuck from Facebook decided that he wanted to take the vast majority of the profits of various creators on his site and sell them all to advertisers and then expand his website at the same pace. Facebook was once going to be a competitor for YouTube. This is the worries in like 2012, 2013, 2014. This is why Google had Google Plus around 2015 and 2016 before they retired it. Very little people still remember that. Google Plus, I believe, is now a subscription plan for like Google OneDrive or whatever it's called. But that was an actual like social web networking site that was meant to compete with Facebook because Facebook was trying to compete with YouTube. And YouTube just couldn't keep up. So what I believe they did was they started making higher requirements to monetize your YouTube channel. They started taking most of the revenue. And especially after Google took over, they couldn't possibly allow the opportunity that Facebook would one day compete with Google. I mean, Facebook was such a big titan back in the day. They just saw it as rival competition. And so Mahmoud was very interesting because not only was he personally friends with Kanye West way back in the day, not only was he personally friends with a lot of these giant tech CEOs, not only are there pictures of him at these giant tech startup and TechCrunch conferences, not only did he actually there's a video of him with Sacha Baron Cohen, who later played Borat, and Sacha Baron Cohen is trying to troll him, and he's trolling back. There's another video of him where he's at a stage at a TechCrunch conference where Mark Zuckerberg is sitting on the opposite of him, and Mahmoud just turns to him he sounded like he was high on weed. I don't want to implicate anything, but he turns to him with the sunglasses that he put on to obscure his face. He's just like, man, you're full of shit, man. Just turning to Mark Zuckerberg. And Mark Zuckerberg was standing at him there with like the lizard face as Mahmoud insults him. It was the most fascinating guest to have on. And the fact that Mahmoud was about to do he was down to do literally any podcast at all that he wanted he could have went on. So I decided to start off the show with that. I got one of my friends, Ben, to help me with it. And then we got that podcast up in the air. So what happened later with that was we decided to make like a second episode later. Before that, it was just like us shooting the shit online, and those episodes didn't really age well. So we decided to do volume 2. That started with Mahmoud. Then we got another small YouTuber on that has since deleted his channel. Then Ben and I didn't really have any ideas for more podcasts, so I took a break from that. I'm just not going to run a show. I'm going to focus on this video editing thing.
Of course.
But after the podcast with Mahmoud, me and him started talking about a lot of the ideas that he had. He had these various websites that I was also helping him with, giving him ideas, also helping with the code, like giving him reviews and feedback. A bunch of programmers were also working on it, people that I made quick friends with. We had like tester group chats. And Mahmoud's idea was to make a social media website that would be more fairer in pairing all of its users, which is not a rare concept. There are many of these websites, but he wanted to make one of his own. And I also coincidentally had the idea way back when that once I learned how to program these social media websites with PHP and Python and Java and JavaScript, I would make these front ends and back ends, and I would make a social media that also pays its users. So I told him, hey, this is an idea that I already had. Do you want to see what I have? And he said, yeah, sure. So we started talking more about it off of the show. And he basically had this idea that he was going to go public with in 2024. Something tragic happened then. So Mahmoud was feeling very ill for very many years. He had surgery on, I believe it was a brain tumor that he had. And in March of 2024, just, I believe, a day after I last messaged him, he passed away. So the first way that I noticed that was that he didn't reply to any of my messages. I believe it was even less than 24 hours. I had messaged him a couple of hours before. Yeah. And then he replied to that. He hearted my message on Instagram. And then he didn't reply for a matter of hours. So I started texting his friends over Instagram. They said they had no idea. Someone tried to reach out to his girlfriend. Someone tried to reach out to his dad. A month later, I go on his main post, and there's a bunch of people on his newest post, and there's a bunch of people commenting on there. If you still go on Mahmoud's account, like the podcast that we did is still up on his post. But a few posts after that, there's his last post, and there's around 200 comments around 100 comments at the time of people saying rest in peace, RIP. I'm like, what is happening? I go on his Wikipedia page. It doesn't say he died. He had a Wikipedia page all these years, and it doesn't say he passed away. It says he got this tumor treated, and it's been many years, and he's still alive. Then the next day, because Wikipedia relies on primary sources, Genius.com releases this letter about how one of our founders and the former CEO and one of the lead programmers back in the day, who went to Yale and did all this prestigious shit and rolled around in these high societies, and before he died, told Mark Zuckerberg to go zuck himself, and did this, various other shit, and rode in the same like car as Kanye West, like back in the back seat, just shooting the shit with him. He got to do all this cool stuff before he died in his like early 30s, and then a sort of mentor figure to me. And then Genius.com announced that he passed away. Wikipedia could officially put it on now. Then there was obituaries. Then the news stories came. I believe they even came before them, but they started to be spreaded about how this guy like randomly passed away at this apartment, and people didn't notice for days until his dad came to check up on him, because one of our mutual friends, me and Makbot, told his dad that something had been going on. And then tribute to the family and whatever. And that was just like such a big culture shock to me. So I was just like, okay, what are we going to do with this now? So years later, one of the friends that I had made around this time, a kid named Jordan, he also had a podcast or a show on YouTube that was unsuccessful for many, many years. He was very much into philosophy. He was very much into political philosophy. He was into this kind of stuff. I have a distant cousin named Kaz that also wanted to do a show sometime. And as soon as he began to connect with him, I showed both Jordan back in the day, and I also showed later Kaz the podcast that I did with Makbot. And this was before Makbot passed away in 2023, I believe. That it was when I showed him that. Makbot passed away in 2024. Even 2022. Back then, we had all been kind of brewing the idea to start this little collective and to publish these videos. Soon before I finished secondary school, keep in mind, Jesus, most of this was happening while I was still in secondary school, or high school as we would call in the US. While I was still literally riding that bus, just shortly before I got my car, I started a small community. We called it the Scorpion Movement. The general idea was to gather like a group of like little like creators and thinkers. First of all, I had the brilliant idea. Okay, I stored up some money. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start posting videos. I'm going to hire 12 video editors to help me put these videos out very frequently. So I thought that was the most brilliant idea ever. I got some money. I can spend it all on video editors. So I don't have to edit videos for anyone else. What happened was they made like 20 videos, and then I ran out of money, and then I stopped posting. So that was a very stupid idea. But as soon as those video editors had went their separate ways or started working with other clients around my Discord server, or the community that we made on Telegram, or even the communities that we made all across the web, we had it reaching out on Twitter. We were basically just trying to post as much interesting stuff as we could find from around the web on Instagram and other places as we possibly could. And the idea of it was basically to get as much exposure for it as possible, for it as we could. And at first, we just started rambling to each other. So what we did was we got on a call, me and a couple of people in the small community. We made a small group chat over Telegram and WhatsApp and iMessages and Discord, and we decided, hey, we're just going to shoot the shit. We're just going to talk about some things. And if anyone from the community wants to join us, then they can. And we'll make a group channel where we can put up a bunch of this video stuff. So if this podcast goes well, we'll make another one. So I said, okay. We made the first podcast. It was about, I believe, cybernetics and the future of humanity. It was a very long tangential episode of 3 hours. It was me, who had very little political affiliations. It was my friend Jordan, who also had very little political affiliations. And it was his friend who went by the username of Flying Kabbalah, who was more right-leaning at the time. So we had this very interesting 3-hour discussion about like Hegelian philosophy and like all these like classical, continental, and neoclassical, Neoplatonist Christian philosophers, and how this all like interconnects in modern day. And we uploaded it, and it got a couple hundred views in like a couple weeks. So we were just like, oh wow, like people are actually watching us ramble for hours on end. We should invite some guests on. So to this day, this philosophy podcast, this pet project of mine and Jordan's, which I've effectively just helped him co-host and helped with recording and stuff like that with OBS, my little video editing skills that I can't find, and helping him find some of the guests. Um, the little contributions I made have ranked and stacked up, because since that time we got a number of guests on. So I did mention that we had a debate with the streamer Destiny. We had Home Math on, who was a YouTuber with 600,000 subscribers, I believe, slightly Manosphere Jason and self-help now. He makes like drawings and stuff, and it's all like explanative, informative videos, mostly about dating and philosophy and psychology and human psychology and stuff like that. And we started with these big YouTubers, then we can have a name for ourselves. So then we started emailing professors. We got William Eggington, who is a professor at Stanford, to come on our podcast. We got Dr. Hazar Gad, or more accurately, Jordan, I think, got him. He is an Israeli professor. We got a bunch of these influencers to come on our show and talk about various things that they were interested in. We made it very broad so that we could just shoot the shit with whoever wanted to shoot the shit, or we could do a professional podcast. We get into whatever topic they wanted to talk about. And to this day, we've gotten a lot of interesting guests on. We had Shazam Watkins a while on. He is also like a pretty well-known writer. He collaborated with a bunch of other well-known writers in, I believe, these more like dissonant spaces, where these are people who have communities around these niche books and things, and they make them very dramatic. And it's always a very fun read when you get into that. And Shazam's book was also quite intriguing in its own sense. I do believe that a lot of the things that we had discussed with various artists and writers and musicians was particularly interesting. So we had Shazam from the writers. We had an artist named Gio Penichetti, who also is like part of these spaces on the internet, but also does a lot of his own work and sells it. And he's a very creative mind as well. We had a musician by the name of Adam Gennady, who has been performing these for around 20 to 25 years, these talking and these, I believe he calls it this talking, the like saying the lyrics songs. And I was very much into like artists like Phil Oakes and Bob Dylan, like these folk artists back in the day. I've actually seen like Bob Dylan, like encountered him in person before, which is insane because you have this sort of coalescence of me. Was like a kid during 2016, 2017, and then I meet someone who was famous in the 60s. But yeah, that's something that I can now put behind me. And I was very curious to hear from Gennady, because he also had this audience around him, and he was a very like straightforward guy. He's gonna shoot the shit with you. He's gonna tell you, man, this is so goddamn stupid. I can't take this shit anymore. Like all these people trying to sign me labels, and I was a journalist for a time, and they kicked me out because I didn't want to write the stuff that they were writing. I'm never signing with a New York publisher because they're trying to censor me in my words. I'm gonna get it out how I want to. And then I look at it, and I look, he has a profile on Wikipedia. I'm like, hell yeah, dude. Like, I just totally get behind this. I understand you completely. So I had a lot of fun talking to that guy as well. Gio Penichetti and Shazam Watkins, way after then as well, in that order, I believe. But Adam Gennady was definitely a cool guest because he had toured all across like England and the US, and has now just been living like a quiet life somewhere in a ranch, where he's trying to stay in touch with his physical world, which is something that I always aspired to do and never could very well. So I thought that was really interesting. So I think we've got a lot of the guests on to branch outside of this initial idea of a philosophy podcast. We get, I helped Jordan make around 20 episodes, still counting, and a lot of them are 2 to 3 hours long. So I'm very experienced in yapping for multiple hours, as you probably know by now. And a lot of the time we do tend to ramble on too long and not get to share many of our diverse perspectives and ideas over one single podcast. But when it comes to multiple, there's some funny moments. There's some moments that are quite sad or introspective. There's moments where we talk about like personal things, or we talk about our philosophy or our backgrounds, or our work, or what we think about certain things, how certain things have influenced us, or inspirations. I've by now done the podcast from like multiple countries where I just phone in via Zoom. I'm like, hey guys, like let's do the show now. Let's talk about some things. And there's always something to look forward to, some more interesting thing that we have a discussion with a guest, or just by ourselves, or with someone else. So that was just a fun pastime. It's never something that I intended to do professionally. I mostly just wanted to help out my friend, and it's gotten us to this point. So Scorpion Movement Podcast on YouTube. Yeah, I plug it as much as I can.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that as a concept, because, and this is something that I say to pretty much everybody, like, and it's the thing I like about the digital age, is the fact that you're not really ever much more than an email away from connecting with somebody from all corners of the earth, for example, where you can just
Right.
literally learn their story and, like you say, just shoot the shit, just have a conversation, just get to know them, really sort of get to know their experiences and things. For example, to take the founder of Genius.com, like you mentioned, like how crazy is it to hear those stories that
Yeah.
like this is somebody you're speaking to live, albeit like over like a digital call like this, but like you're speaking to this person, they're telling you about all these stories about all these famous world-renowned people, and you're kind of just like just like holy shit, this is like the most mind-blowing thing. Like how is this,
Yeah.
like how am I talking to this person right now? Like, and it's like it's I think it's like such an incredible thing because obviously there certain people have like almost like a level of fame or esteem or whatever based on things that they do, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like, people are all, we're all humans, and we all kind of feel
Yeah.
the same human emotion. And in some people's cases it's just a case of, I saw this email, I want to do this, I want, whether it be because why not, or because people just enjoy just sharing, they want to maybe help somebody's content, for example, it could be any number of things. But just to like be able to like talk to people like that and really kind of understand the things that they have gone, even if there are stories that you've heard about from public sources, to just be
Mhm.
able to have that conversation and hear it from the source itself is just like kind of it's such a surreal feeling. Like honestly, I 100%, like I absolutely love just that as a concept, just being able to talk to people, get to know their story, just, and then put it out into the world, just so then somebody else can hopefully get something out of it too. Like I just think it's an incredible thing, and that people have a lot of things to say about the digital age, but I certainly think that it has some incredible things about it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Jacob, it has been fantastic chatting to you. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on behind the camera with AndyGames. It has been, the stories you have told have been second to none. Like, it has been incredible. 100% buying your books, by the way. Just saying that right
Yeah.
now,
Oh, thank
100%.
you so much, man. I
Of
really
course,
appreciate
no,
that.
of course, because like even having just talked about them, like I'm more invested, and I definitely am going to give them 100% a
Awesome. I
read.
really hope it has that effect. Yeah.
Oh, of course, man, honestly. And like I say, thank you so much for the time. Do you have any final thoughts for the listeners today?
No, I believe some final thoughts that are more selfish of mine. So I guess I do have some final thoughts. But if I had to make something up on the spot, it would be to self-plug myself. Of course, my
Of
books
course,
are
please
available.
do, please. Yeah.
It's one search away. The Scorpion Movement podcast is also live on YouTube. You can search up my name. There's my website, and there's an inbuilt store that we also have that I also programmed myself to showcase my abilities, where you can order the books directly in whatever format. A paperback, I think hardcover is actually upcoming, since it's become cheaper since then. We have the audiobooks, we have the ebooks, and those are relatively low prices, since we want as many people as possible to get them. People can contact me directly, and I pretty much answer all questions they have, even though I get quite a lot of emails these days, whether it's from video editing or for writing. And I think the best way to actually summarize it without being entirely selfish was to be a little, would to be to give a little bit of suggestion or recommendation to those who might be listening. Um, it might sometimes feel like it is way too late to actually begin on a project, especially when you have missed out some major opportunities. But it is way better to go throughout the years and say that you have done something, rather than wake up and not
Yeah.
remember anything. One of the greatest things that has happened to me since writing the book is not the fact that I've been able to put my story out there, as a lot of people think and suggest and ask me about, but the fact that every day I wake up each morning, of course, as everybody does, but I wake up with the realization after a couple minutes, when I regain consciousness, that, whoa, like I'm now in the body of this guy who wrote these 2 books. I don't remember every single word that I have written for each of my books. I don't remember having every single conversation that I had with these major like creators and editors and these streamers and these like CEOs, or these professors and these philosophers. I don't think about all the stuff that I've done. But I believe that if people look upon some of my work many years later and they see that this is something that I now have, this is now a part of me. This is now a part of my personality. So I get to wake up as someone that has accomplished something. And I think that raises my self-esteem to a degree where I'm able to push myself to do things like go to the gym, where I'm able to push myself to things like cook for myself, or to like learn to play music better, as piano and keyboard, as I've and of course guitar, as I've been doing, to learn new skills, to reach out to more people, to keep going on with the podcast, to go hiking or exploring, or to meet up with friends, or to get a couple beers and just have a lazy day in, or eat pizza, or watch new shows, or watch new movies, because I feel like because I've already accomplished something, I can experience life more adequately. So I would end off with a single piece of advice. If it feels like it is too late for anyone who might be listening to accomplish something, it feels like it is too late to actually do a project because they feel like they haven't done it in ages. They feel like they're out of the rhythm or the motion, or they've been keeping with this idea for too long, and they don't really have many other ways to go about it. You can just do it. You don't lose anything by doing something that's too late. I mean, even when I was in school, I would turn assignments weeks and months late in, and it's better late than never. That has been the motto of my entire life, and I've always kept to it. So that's my single voice and motto of motivational advice, I would suppose. So those are my words.
Yeah. And that's some fantastic advice. And honestly, I have to say it resonates with me personally because
Mhm.
I started this podcast when I was 30 years old, and people
Yeah,
would be like,
it's not too
that's
late at all, man.
exactly. And it's not too late. It's never too late to do anything, as you say. And if you want to go do something, do it. If you want to collab with that person, reach out to them, because no matter what, I don't think anything that, if depending on what you want to do, I don't think any attempt that fails is going to ruin your credibility or your life. So
Absolutely not. No,
just go and do it. But yes, Jacob, thank you again so much for your time today. It has
of
been
course.
incredible chatting to you today. Um, yeah, so my guest today has been Jakub Rucinski, author of Paradigm Shift, No Breaks, and co-host of the Scorpion Movement podcast. Definitely check that out, and just Google it. You'll find it everywhere on YouTube for Scorpion Movement.
Yeah,
But yes, again, Jacob, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. I've been Andy
thank
Games
you. I
underscore
appreciate it,
94.
Andrew.
This has been Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it. And there you have it. That was my conversation with Jakub Rucinski. Now, every single guest who appears on Behind the Camera, I am incredibly grateful for. I've had the opportunity to meet and talk to so many incredible people from so many different parts of the world, and just share stories, share experiences, and just have a great time. And honestly, getting to hear people's stories is something I will always be grateful for, especially whenever I get a guest like Jakub, who has lived a whole life at just 21 years old. Absolutely incredible stuff. I'd like to thank Jakub for taking the time to appear on Behind the Camera. Just incredible, incredible experiences that this man has had. This has been Behind the Camera with AndyGames. Thank you for tuning in, and we will be back again with another installment very soon. Peace.